This week, on the 6th day of the month of Mar Cheshvan, we observe the 843rd anniversary of the ascent to the Temple Mount by none other than the great luminary, the Rambam, Maimonides. And he writes in a very moving letter to his students of how he departed from the city of Akko, and he traveled to Jerusalem under great duress in the face of grave danger, because this was the time of the Crusaders, and Jews that were out on the open roads placed themselves in peril. He traveled to Jerusalem, he ascended the Temple Mount, he writes of how he prayed at the place of the Holy Temple, and the experience for him was so moving that he established that day, the 6th day of Cheshvan, as a day of personal rejoicing, a Yom Tov, a personal festival in which he would every year celebrate it with special prayers of thanksgiving and a festive meal. And it was so important to him that he merited to visit the Temple Mount that he actually left instructions for all his descendants for all time to observe the 6th day of the month of Mar Cheshvan as a personal Yom Tov. And so the concept of the Jewish people visiting the Temple Mount is not new. It's actually the way of our sages. When we read in the Talmud about Rabbi Akiva, who comforted his colleagues when they all cried upon perceiving a fox that exited from the place of the Holy of Holies, this is not something that they saw from far away with high-powered binoculars. They were there at the place of the Temple Mount. It's always been known where the confines are, where the borders of sanctity and holiness are. And in our generation, unfortunately, it's true, there's been a disconnect, and the knowledge is somewhat more difficult to come by. However, there are great Torah scholars today who make it their priority to study and to learn and to clarify exactly what the path, the permitted route of visiting the Temple Mount is. And it should be understood that those Jews today who do so under halachic guidance and after consulting with great Torah leaders are doing so out of a very high motivation to fulfill the commandment, and their action cannot be dismissed as insubordination to Torah authorities, because there are great authorities that maintain the commandment, the mitzvah of visiting the Temple Mount is indeed viable today. The Moslems who are now in control of the Temple Mount de facto do not allow any other expression of religious sentiment at all on the Temple Mount, neither Christian prayer nor Jewish prayer. They hold the Temple Mount in a stranglehold, although the Supreme Court of the State of Israel, backed up by Israeli law, states that everyone has a right to access the holy places and to pray there. The police, cowered by the specter of Muslim violence, do not allow for the status quo to be in any way challenged. The status quo meaning only Muslim prayer on the Temple Mount. The Arabs have discovered that all they have to do is have a few kids hurl a few rocks at some tourists or some innocent Jewish worshippers, and the police will summarily close the Temple Mount down to the Jews. And unfortunately, the press picks up on this and collectively blames the Jewish people, who are branded as right-wing, extremist, settler, activists, and all sorts of labels, all those Jewish people who have a pure and simple and beautiful desire to be seen by God in the place that He chose, to offer a prayer in the place where the Bible testifies that all prayer is listened to. These people are branded as the enemies of peace and those that are instigating some sort of world war. And all eyes are on Israel. What's going on? What are the Israelis up to? Are they trying to build a temple? Are they trying to undermine the Muslim structures on the Temple Mount? Are they trying to get away with something? And it's all because the rights of the Jewish people are expendable. And unfortunately, we're so concerned with how everyone else feels. But when it comes to this, our Holy of Holies, the most significant and the only really holy place that we have in the world, unfortunately, Jewish rights are totally trampled upon. This week in Jerusalem, there was a landmark conference that discussed the concept of how important it is to strengthen Jewish ties to the Temple Mount. There were many important speakers, including prominent rabbis, Roshei Yeshiva, and some members of the Knesset. And speaker after speaker described the fact that, and bemoaned the fact really, that the disconnect between the Jewish people and the Temple Mount is leading to unspeakable and irrevocable tragedy on a national scale for the Jewish people, and also on a global scale, because when the Jewish people are connected to the Temple Mount, and when the temple is rebuilt, that will usher in the time of peace and tranquility for the whole world. And we heard testimony from speakers who met with various individuals in the security establishment here in the State of Israel, whether top-ranking officers and commanders in the police department, or even figures within the intelligence community. And all of these men stressed that if only more Jews would visit the Temple Mount on a regular basis, the entire balance of power would be shifted. There would be a paradigm shift. The attitude of the government and the police would be different towards the Jewish visitors on the Temple Mount. The Muslim terror would be abated of itself, and the concept of bringing many, many Jewish people to visit the Temple Mount was stressed as the cure to the overall security situation, and this from a totally secular security standpoint. And the people that visit today, they are not upstarts, they are not instigating trouble, they are not challenging the Muslims with violence, they are simply motivated by a desire to fulfill the commandment of showing proper reverence to the place of the Holy Temple, and of being seen there by God, and of feeling what it feels like to breathe the air of this one place that God chose, and in this one place which is the nerve center, the heart of Jewish history, past and future. This is the place where all of God's promises will be fulfilled for all of mankind. But what about the present? This can only happen if we take responsibility for ourselves and show God that indeed we feel something is missing from our lives, and not allow our enemies to trample upon that which is most sacred for the Jewish people.